But what it does is it teaches you what it feels like to wake up, what it feels like for your mind to remind you of something, what it feels like to be in the fog of rumination and projection, you know, because
Mhm.
you just woke up from it. So you start to get familiar with how these things feel. You really start to connect back to the workings of your mind. And eventually, you will come to the understanding that you're not your thoughts. We say, "Oh, I had this great thought." Well, who is it? Who's the I
Yeah.
that had the thought, right? And so once you realize that you're not your thoughts, then the question, well, then who am I if I'm not my thoughts? Now we can go on the exploration of reconnecting to our authentic selves. And so it is really quite profound and active. It's not a passive thing at all.
This is Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney and Jenkins. Hello, and welcome to the 91st episode of Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about the inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. This episode, I have with me Bob Martin. Bob went from being a high powered mob lawyer during Miami's wild cocaine cowboy days to a certified meditation teacher with an MSW to go with his JD. He's helped hundreds redesign their thinking for the life that they dream of. Bob's journey is anything but ordinary. Now, a two-time published author and professor of wellness at Elon University, Bob blends Taoist wisdom, brain science, psychology, and humor to tackle everything from breaking free of limiting beliefs to finding clarity and resilience in life's chaos. Bob has a knack for making big ideas relatable, and I enjoyed this conversation so much. I'm constantly impressed by the quality of guests that I'm having on this podcast, and Bob's story is so unique and fascinating, and he was just a joy to share this conversation with. So I'm really looking forward to introducing you to Bob Martin and his wisdom.
We don't really get into the stuff that's helpful. I mean,
Right.
my story's interesting, but I don't know that it's the stuff that makes a difference with other folks.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll see what happens.
Okay,
Yeah, whenever you're ready, just let me know and we'll just dive
I'm
in.
ready. I'm
Okay,
ready.
perfect.
Okay.
The theme of this podcast is about following your inner voice or your inner authenticity or your intuition or whatever you feel like calling it. And because of the nature of what you do with meditation and helping people connect with that inner part of themselves, there must have been a lot of things that you had to encounter along the way in order to get to where you are. So, one of the first things that I like to ask is when is the first time that you realized that you had this inner voice of your own and that you were able to follow it?
Hmm. First time. You know, um, it would have to have been in my early teenage years
Mhm.
after reading To Kill a Mockingbird. And I was so taken with the characters there. Atticus Finch, who just was so heroic in that book, and stood up for justice. There was something that it was within me saying, "Yeah, yeah, that's what it means to be a real human being." And I think I fell in love with him. Um, so I think that's the first time there was something within me that was reaching for something.
Do you remember like what was in your life at that current time in your environment that maybe might have allowed that to stand out for you?
Well, I was a big boy, and in those days we called big boys husky. And matter of fact, J.C. Penney's even had a husky department. And I can remember my mother grabbing me and pulling me by the hand into J.C. Penney's in her loud, shrill voice, screaming out, "Where's the husky department?" To my great embarrassment. Um, but also, I had gone through all of elementary school being bullied and by the girls, and I had a I had a friend named Charlie Greenfield, and Charlie stood up for me. Um, and we left elementary school and we went to middle school together. And it's funny that we kind of parted ways in that he had come to learn the power of groupthink when he saw, the pain that it was creating. Whereas I felt I wanted to be the center of attention and the class clown, and I wanted people to like and laugh at my jokes, and did funny things, which was really counterproductive because everybody thought I was a jerk. Uh, uh, so, those were some of the things that were going on in my life. I felt as an outsider. Also, grew up in my first 10 years. I grew up in a carnival and amusement parks, so I was kind of a carny, which meant I was an outsider as well. So, didn't have really a hometown, and was jealous of some of the things that I had seen other people have. So those were some of the forces that were acting on me at the time, and I suppose I felt I was being treated unfairly, and Atticus stood up for me.
The power of storytelling
Yeah, yeah, really.
that can connect us for sure. So what happened after that? After you realized that Atticus was something that inspired you, how did that propel you forward in your life?
Um, there was another character that I came across, Don Quixote de la Mancha, um, tilting at windmills, dreaming the impossible dream. Uh, and I think that was a couple of years later. And that was another thing that kind of took me away. Um, but I had a pretty uneventful high school. Towards the end of high school, I started to find out that my body and my size had a function, and that was playing football.
Mm.
So I was useful. And I think being useful and being lettered and being on the team and a first stringer and that kind of thing started to give me, a sense of confidence in myself. And funny, we practiced a lot, and when I was a defensive tackle, and I'm telling you this because I'm thinking about the nature of the podcast and how, practice after practice and watching the screen, you start to get that muscle memory and start to act on without thinking. You sense and feel the movement of people around you because, you become trained. And I just connected this for the very first time. Wow. Uh, there's something I just connected because that sense of being in the zone
Mhm.
later was nurtured by Master Watching Ni, a 72nd generation Taoist master that I met in my 30s and who I studied under for 8 years. And he basically brought that sense to another level where he said, yeah, sure, athletes can act in the zone. You can live your whole life in the zone. And he was the model. He did. We asked him once, what's it like to be Master Ni? And he just simply said, no rehearsing thoughts.
Mm.
No rehearsing thoughts. He never thought of what he was going to do or how to respond or what he was going to say. He was just responsive, innately, intuitively, by muscle memory. It came after a lot of training, no kidding. I mean, when you're a Shaolin priest, you go through years and years of body and mind training. So it's not something where you wave a wand and just get that. And but I just connected that that experience of being an athlete was nurtured later on in my life. It was pretty cool. Thank you. Uh,
Yeah, you kind of took the words out of my mouth because I was going to ask you how playing sports connected you to being able to be in your mind in a very focused way. So, yeah.
mhm.
So how did you stumble upon studying with this man talking about?
By total accident. So my folks I've coined a word for them, non-theists. Okay, they weren't against God or religion. It just wasn't a conversation that we had in the house. We were, and the reason for that is that my dad was Hungarian royalty, and all of his ancestors were wiped out by the Bolsheviks. My mom was Roma Gypsy, and everybody wiped out the Romas. And so they really had no ancestors. I have no ancestors that are living, and they came to the conclusion that whatever divine force there may be, if there is one at all, it couldn't be merciful. And
Wow.
so it wasn't worth following. And so we just didn't have that conversation. Um, Although, when I was in my later teen years, I read a lot of science fiction. And if you know anything about science fiction, it always is talking about creative forces and alien forces and things that put the universe, that organize the universe and the like. And so that God issue always comes up again and again as a theme in science fiction. So it started me thinking and searching and seeking, what that connection was. Um, so fast forward, by another amazing and odd set of circumstances, I became a lawyer. Never expected to. My ambition was to sell enough hot dogs in the summer on the boardwalk in Queens to not have to work in the winter. That was my ambition. But there was a fellow who kept pushing me, and so I became a lawyer. And I worked in Janet Reno's office, the prosecutor of Miami-Dade County, Florida, during the time of Scarface and Miami Vice in those years.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty crazy, and I was in economic crimes, and we hit the mob for a lot of money, 72 million. And then I went out in private practice, and I'll call him Johnny, the Italian branch of the conglomerate that ran Miami, which included Colombians and Haitians and Cubans and but anyway, Johnny came to see me and basically said that I was good enough to beat their lawyers who were pretty good, and he wanted to send me clients. So I started being not consigliere, nothing like that, but just hanging with them and getting a lot of very good paying clients. And I was hanging with them, and I was going out to those chrome and glass discotheques of the 70s. And remember, it was the Cocaine Cowboy days, and so there was a lot of cocaine around, and I was hanging out with them, and my personal life was kind of spiraling downward, so I was seeing a therapist. So I came to a crossroads in my life, and I asked him a very important question: should I go this way or that way? And he picked up some coins, my therapist, who I'm paying $65 an hour to be the wisdom advisor to me. And he
Okay.
starts shaking them in his hands and dropping them on the desk and making mathematical calculations and drawing little lines. And finally, he came to the calculation of 32, and he opened up a book to that chapter. And the name of the chapter was Retreat. So I cursed him out, of course. I'm paying him to be my therapist, not a soothsayer. And
Right.
uh, and I stomped out. But the word is kind of like tattooed on my forehead. It was like retreat, 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 retreat. I couldn't get away from it, and so I shut down some of the things that was I was bleeding money and were not wise endeavors. Started to pull back, um, started to look at my situation, started attending NA meetings, And within all of that, I went back to George, tail between my legs, and said, "What was that?" And he said, "That was the I Ching,
Mm.
sometimes called the I Ching, the classic book of changes." I said, "Where does that come from?" He says, "It's Taoist." And I go, "What's Taoism?" So that's when I found out that George was the English language editor from the very prolific Master Ni, who wrote books in Chinese. They were translated into English. He edited them. And he was a disciple and teacher who had studied under Ni for decades.
Oh,
And so Ni came to Miami, and we had a Taoist group there. And for 8 years, I engaged in Taoist practices, contemplative practices, and the like. Um, and um, and Master Ni taught me a lot. So that's what I mean. It was by complete
wow.
serendipity.
Yeah, what a moment for your therapist to do something so theatrical for you.
Yeah. I guess he read it in my energy, you know. He said this is the time that he needs to know this.
Yeah, interesting. I'm trying to make a connection to the narcotics and like state of mind as far as meditation goes. Is there like a thread that you can connect there of
Well, yeah, you know, under the influence of any intoxicant, you're pretty mindless. The chemicals are speaking,
yeah.
and there's not a lot of room for contemplation. Nor interesting enough, some of the brain science now is making a very dear correlation between the use of intoxicants, especially alcohol, but the use of intoxicants and the inability to connect.
Hmm.
The psychic inability to feel a connection, that it dampens those neural pathways specifically. And so it makes you feel alone and arrogant and egotistical and totally self reliant. Um, and That's why so many, you know, find it difficult to reach out for help. Got
That
to get rid of the chemicals first. There's no mindfulness until you get rid of the chemicals.
definitely. So were you working with the mindfulness as you were also in the NA program? Was that part of
No,
Oh,
no, not then. The progression was kind of like this. Taoism, there's a great book that I read back then called The Tao of Physics. And Taoism is an extremely energy based philosophy. There's yin and yang, the negative and the positive, but not negative and positive like good and bad, like a judgment, negative and positive like the poles of a battery.
mhm.
You know, you wouldn't call the negative pole of a battery the bad pole, right? It's just you need those differences for energy to flow. And in Taoism, it's the flow of energy that creates everything. So although it's not a God-based thinking, it is an energy-based thinking, and I maybe it's just semantics that are the difference, you know.
I was just wondering how the that energy helped you in your life to move away from the past life of narcotics, if that was a
Oh, okay. Hmm.
transition for you.
So,
Yeah. Oh,
so you know, I look back on so many things in my life, and you know, it's above my pay grade when you say the word serendipity, because some people say there's no such thing as, you know, circumstance or happenstance or coincidence, that there's all some flow of energy that makes connections. And there are enough things in my life that would lend me to believe that. But again, for me, that's above my pay grade. I don't know. I just know that certain things happened at certain times which were magnificent. And one of those things was that my mob client's son got arrested and charged with a 15-year felony. And up to then, we had a very clear agreement. I wouldn't do anything illegal or unethical. I wouldn't suborn perjury. I wouldn't put on a client and do any of that, which was good for him because I was respected by the courts. Then his son got arrested, and there was no saying no to Johnny.
Mm.
He wanted me to do things that I was not going to do, which resulted in my deciding to move to North Carolina. And we parted friends. I went and I told him exactly what was going on. We were always very honest and open with each other. And he said, shook my hand, and he said, no problem. So I moved to North Carolina, and what was wonderful about that is that it gave me a completely open and blank canvas to recreate my life. So here I am, this fella, with kind of like this stimulus of Don Quixote and Atticus Finch over here, and I'm moving along, and then I'm running into these issues, and I get Master Knee, and then there's all of the transformation that happens, and then just at the right time, boom, I get to have a blank canvas to rewrite my life.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
And
Yeah.
go on a retreat. Yes.
Yeah. 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 I retreated. I definitely retreated. And so I got to North Carolina, and Taoism is not very meditation oriented. It's contemplation. We look into things and consider things and think things through a lot, not really so much in meditation, and there's a lot of movement meditation. um, but when I got to North Carolina, there weren't a lot of Taoists here. So I started going to Buddhist temples. And now Buddhism, that is meditation. So that's where, it was suggested, and I started, and I tried. I had fits and starts. Finally, I got a coach, and then when that happened, I developed a consistent practice that uh, lasted long enough and more consistently enough that I was accepted into a 2 year, really intensive teacher training program.
What was that experience like for you? Going
The
from,
the 2 years,
yeah.
it's intense because you're going through the rest of your life at the same time. I came up here and I went back to being a small town. I went from being big city lawyer to a small town lawyer, you know, uh, dealing with cases like killing antlerless deer, you from homicides and like, you know. While I'm doing all of that, I'm also, you know, taking this course. It was 30 minutes a day, and meetings every week, interviews, practicums, retreats. It was a lot. But it was wonderful in its own way, and certainly taught me a lot about me, and gave me a lot of experiences, and allowed me the time to really reflect deeply into who I was and what I wanted in life. I suppose, now, again, this is great. You got me talking, and I'm coming to these insights. um, during that period of time, the first, I guess, stage of meditation is developing the skill to be able to watch your thoughts. A lot of people think it's about quieting the mind, but it has nothing to do with quieting the mind. It's about learning to watch your thoughts and be an observer, or reconnect with your soul if we can allow ourselves to be spiritual. So it's skill building. The second stage is actually the cultivation of those things that are the antidotes to the discomforts of life, like wanting, not wanting, attachment, ignorance. And so you purposefully and intentionally develop loving kindness, sympathetic joy, equanimity, and the like, compassion. And there are meditations that you sit and you intentionally cultivate these things. And there comes a time when you can actually feel your heart open. There's actually a physical sensation in your chest, and you know that something is different. And from that moment in your life on, the only thing that's important to you is that you live a life devoted to easing suffering. Um, and so that during that 2 years, that happened.
Interesting. How did that experience inform your practice of law?
So, mostly you think of a lawyer, I take care of their legal stuff. You come to me, oh, I'm charged with grand larceny and I've had three priors and blah, blah, and this is the evidence against me. And, you go to court, and if the evidence is strong, you try to work out a deal, and then say goodbye. That's what you think. Um, it changed my view of my role with my clients from simply that to wanting to make a change in their perspective of their own lives such that they would not return to reoffending. I wanted to influence them, or that's wrong. I wanted to give them the tools for them to influence themselves
Mm.
enough so that they would not reoffend. And I came up with three things that I wanted to do with each client. One, I wanted to make sure that the client felt that they were
Mm.
heard sincerely and authentically. No matter what it was that they wanted to say, I was there to listen to them and hear them. Two, I wanted them to be clear that somebody stood up for them. And three, whatever might have happened to them as a result of it, if they go to prison or jail or probation or dismissed, that they understood why what was happening to them was happening to them. And I felt that if they could feel heard, that somebody stood up for them and they understood more about why what was happening, that there was a better chance that they wouldn't reoffend. And the most wonderful thing about all that is that even today, I'm retired from criminal law. I'd still do some other things, but every once in a while, somebody will come up to me and say, Mr. Martin, when you represented me, it was the last time I got in trouble.
Mm. Yeah, that's powerful work.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for hearing me.
Yeah. Wow. So taking the compassion that you learned from meditation practice into integrating it into all aspects of your life, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so now my life is like so super cool um, because over at Duke University, they spent years trying to figure out. Well, I told you what my teacher training was like, you know,
Yeah.
2 years intensive, 30 minutes a day. I mean, you can't somebody says I'd like to learn meditation. I say, yeah, all you have to do is sit 30 minutes a day for 2 years, go to 4 silent retreats a year. Yeah, that ain't happening, right? uh so over at Duke, they have very stressed out students in the counseling department, the psychology department, and a whole bunch of folks, researchers. They set about with the idea of how can we teach meditation so that these kids have some relief from their stress and anxiety in a way that works for the Western mind. That was their, but we're going to do this. And they did it. They did it. So they created a digital infrastructure where I can actually say to you, Whitney, I could say, if you give me 1 hour a week and promise me to practice 10 minutes a day, and you can give me 5 weeks, I can teach you what meditation is. I can teach you meditation to the extent that it will make a difference in your life, and you'll know it well enough to decide whether it's a practice for you.
Mm.
I can do that. And the way it works is you get an app, and the app, I teach the techniques in the 1 hour that we meet. And you go, all of the meditations are on guided meditations on the app. We're used to that. But what we're not used to is this. After you listen to the guided meditation, you write a log. Maybe you'll say, oh, this was a terrible meditation. There was a dog barking, and I just got so mad. I was all pissed off, and my face was, I felt it in my here, and before I knew it, the bell rang, and I didn't meditate at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Or they'll say, this was a terrible meditation in the first week. I don't know. I can't meditate because every time I try to pay attention to my breath, my mind goes crazy, and all I can think about is what I should have said to that SOB yesterday. Right? So I'll get these logs like that. That comes to my dashboard, and I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And after I feed my dogs and have my coffee and do my own meditation, I sit down and I read the logs every single day. And I write back feedback and coaching every single day. So they might get they'll say it was terrible because, and I'll say, hey, that's perfectly, minds, minds do that because it's an evolutionary thing. When we used to live in the jungle, we were always scanning for danger. And so the mind is constructed so that it scans. So you can't stop it. So don't think it's bad. So don't think that that's that. What you want to do is, I'm proud of you because you noticed that
Mm.
it was doing this. Now, it's always been doing that, but now you notice that it was doing that. So that's a big step forward. So I get to coach like that every single day. And
Wow.
so they don't develop any bad habits. And inside of 2 weeks, the um, you can see the conditioning start to break up. And then all of a sudden, there's this, oh, now I see what you're talking about. And I get to see that happen. And it's like so super cool.
Amazing. Yeah. How long have you been doing that?
Well, I think I've been doing the Koru method for I think 6 years. Yeah.
Wow. So
And
I'm
I've
yeah, you've seen some
huh?
like massive transformations from people.
Oh yeah. Corporate executives. I've done kids out of the foster program, kids out of the juvenile justice program, single moms, weight loss, you know, just all kinds of things.
That's amazing. If someone would like to do that with you, is there a way that they can access that?
Oh, sure. The first thing, so many people ask me, what is meditation and is it right for me? So I wrote a book, Is Meditation for Me? And what is it and what is it not?
Really?
It's only 40 pages and it is a free ebook. And you can go to my website and just click download ebook and it's yours. It's free. There's no obligation, but it'll give you an idea about whether this is a practice you want to follow. It's not the only practice, to have joy and happiness in your life. Jogging is a practice. Going to the top of a mountain is a practice. Sitting on the shore of the ocean is a practice. But intentionally putting yourself and curating your environment intentionally is a practice. So, it's not the only one, but it's the one that, I found to be the most direct, the most straight line. Yeah, this is the function of it is to get you there.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have a really great understanding of how to integrate that practice into daily life and what
Mm-hmm.
you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Can I, yeah,
yeah,
let me
go ahead.
share.
Yeah.
I just had a student, because now, after 4 years of pushing Elon University to have a 4 credit meditation course, this is the first year they did, and I'm teaching it. And so I have 15 college kids every semester in the class. And I had this one kid. So this is not a required course, and so it's an elective, and
Mhm.
so people don't take, they self-select, they don't take it unless they want to. So this one student, she took she decided to take the course. She shows up and she's not, I'm not seeing logs. She's not engaging. Maybe I'll see one little meditation a week, and then and her log is like blah blah. It's like, oh, this meditation was nice. So she's just not engaging. And so I asked her to stay after school, after class once, and I said just that. I said, you took it on your own because you wanted the benefit. And the very first class, we talked about the fact that, you can't go to a gym and have the coach just show you the machines. You got to get on them and work them. You want the benefit. And what's that all about? Well, we talked a little bit, we went a little bit more, and then all of a sudden the floodgates opened up, and turns out that she felt that she always sabotages herself. She always knows what she needs to do to make a difference in her life, but when it comes down to doing it, she just can't make herself do it, and she doesn't feel like she deserves happiness. Wow. Um, so we had, we had a talk. Now, my role is not therapist as a meditation teacher. I'm not a therapist. I mean, I am a therapist, but I don't therapize. And so using the tools, I said, so let's see how we can use the tools. So we started talking about the body sensations she has when she has these feelings. And we were started talking about body scans and getting back in touch with your physical body so you can identify, where it is in your body that you feel the pressure, and then kind of deconstruct that. So using the tools, we started to develop a skill of being able to deconstruct the emotion that she was feeling into its component parts so that she could handle them and manage them. And by the end of the course, she was practicing every day.
Wow,
And but I mean that's going to flow over into the rest of her life,
definitely.
you know. Mhm.
Fantastic. You're doing really important work in the world.
Thank you.
Is there anything on the top of your mind or heart that you feel compelled to share that we haven't gotten to yet?
Um, Most of the people, when they hear meditation, have an awful lot of misconceptions about it. They think it's about quieting the mind, and they know instinctively, they know that can't be done. And they're right, you can't. Um, so then what what are we doing when we meditate? What are we trying to accomplish? And so Whitney, let me ask you this. Have you ever been listening to somebody and you really want to hear what they say, but at some point you realize that you stop listening to them and you're thinking about something else, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that's happened. Yes,
Yes. Yes.
yes, yes. Many times, right? Happened. So when at that moment that you notice that you're not listening, there's this really like very subtle little sense of startle. Yes, it's like, oh, it's like, oh, and we call that waking up. And that is the mindful moment. So, what we do in beginning meditation is we set up that same set of circumstances artificially so that we can repeat it over and over and over again. So, we say, pay attention to your breath. Then your mind goes off on something else. Maybe 4 seconds, you might pay attention to your breath. You start thinking about, did I leave the stove on? What I should have said to that guy. What am I going to have for dinner? I'm hungry, you know. And, but at some point, because you had the intention to put your attention on your breath, your mind is going to remind you that you're not doing it. And you're going to have that same little startle. Oh, I'm not paying attention to my breath. That's usually followed by a whole series of judgments. Oh, I should have been, I lost focus, I can't concentrate, I'm failing, blah, 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 all this stuff. And so eventually, if you stay with it, a lot of people will just break at that. I can't do this. But if you can stay with it right there, you will get run through all the judgments, and then you say, oh, let me go and put my attention back on my breath. And within a few seconds, your mind will go off again, and you'll wake up and you'll return and you'll begin again. And then it'll wander and you'll notice and you return and you begin again. Now, it might take 2 or 3 sessions before you get down the knack of following these little simple instructions. But what it does is it teaches you what it feels like to wake up, what it feels like for your mind to remind you of something, what it feels like to be in the fog of rumination and projection, because
Mhm.
you just woke up from it. So you start to get familiar with how these things feel you really start to connect back to the workings of your mind. And eventually, you will come to the understanding that you're not your thoughts. We say, "Oh, I had this great thought." Well, who is it? Who's the I
Yeah.
that had the thought, right? And so once you realize that you're not your thoughts, then the question, well, then who am I if I'm not my thoughts? Now we can go on the exploration of reconnecting to our authentic selves. And so it is really quite profound and active. It's not a passive thing at all.
Do you ever apply the concept of creativity and flow to these states with your students?
Yes, I mean, the flow's very Taoist.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
yes. Uh, so Master Ni described the flow as, well, there is a term in Taoism called Wu Wei, Wuwei, and it means doing, not doing. And Lao Tzu describes the state as you do nothing, yet nothing remains undone. And it is Master's Ni's being in the zone. So, what Taoism tries to teach, and there are practices that will teach you this, is how to identify and label the particular nature of the flow that you're in. Because, we say go with the flow. Well, so that's like you're floating on a river. So, is it a calm river? Is it white water? Is it leading to a waterfall? Is it stagnant? Is it is it growing mold? What is the nature of the flow? So first you have to learn to identify that. Then the next thing you learn is, how do I align myself with the flow so that I'm making the most effective and efficient use of it? So if I'm out in the water and I want to get into the shore, and I know that the tide goes in and it comes out, goes in and it comes out. So the most effective and efficient use of the flow would be to swim like heck when it's going towards the shore, and when it's going against the shore, only to put out enough energy to maintain my position. So if I can maintain and swim like heck, maintain, swim like heck, I will use the least amount of energy and have the most effective result.
Mm.
So, how do I learn to identify the different flows? This is a time when people won't listen to you. This is a time when you have to punch through. This is a time that you're walking in molasses. This is a time when everybody is hanging on your every word. These are all flows that you have to be able to recognize and align yourself with if you want to have a more effortless and effective life. And I know it sounds like, well, how do I learn all that? There are practices in meditation that help you connect with that.
Yeah. It also seems like connecting with that is connecting like with your authentic self within the moment.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Because in your authentic self has an intelligence. It's just not verbal, but it is very, very powerful, wise, beyond our imagination.
Yes. Do you have any advice or wisdom for when you feel like you're going off of the path of your authentic self and how to navigate back to it and anchor
Um, okay, I would have to ask you, at what stage?
that?
As you're beginning to go with the flow, or as you are advanced in it?
Oh my goodness. I think when you're advanced in it.
Well, when you're advanced in it, it tingles. It's like your antenna goes up and your whole skin starts to tingle. It's like static. you
Yeah.
feel it. It's like, ugh. I'm working way too hard here.
Right.
I'm working way too hard. Um, and like if you're beginning, then yeah, probably are gonna have to experience it a few times. But again, if you're mindful and you have worked with your judgmental ways and you have reduced your judgmentalness, then what you have also done is you've increased your tolerance for discomfort. See, one of the early things that we try to teach is that it's okay to be uncomfortable, that life has a lot of pain in it. You can't do anything about the pain. You can do something about how you respond to it, but
Right.
you have to be able to if I can't tolerate the little burn in my muscle, on the fourth repetition lifting 30 pounds, I'm never going to lift 35, right? If I want to get stronger, I have to have tolerance for the discomfort. And so that goes mentally as well. And one of the things that I look around and I see in today's culture and society is that even in my college students, many, many, many of them have no tolerance for discomfort. They can't even eat a meal by themselves without their phone
Right. Yeah.
because the little bit of discomfort of loneliness is too much.
Yes. Can you talk a little bit maybe about like self-worth and self-love and compassion
Uh,
and self-forgiveness when it comes to those things?
so, from the Bible, Jesus said that he was going to leave us with two commandments. One was to love your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind. And I would say to that commandment was not just, la la, love God, praise God, sing a hymn. It was a commandment to clear up the attic and the mess of our minds. And I'm not being critical or judgmental here. We all have a mess in our minds. I mean, we all do. We all have that blah, blah committee in the head, judgment, all that. So, how can you love God, yourself, or anyone when you have this constant flow of judgment going on in your head? So, we are commanded biblically, we're commanded by the great master to clear up the crap in our minds. Excuse my language. Um, the other one, he said, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, what happens if we don't love ourselves? What happens if we are highly self critical? How can we truly love our neighbor? Or would we love our neighbor by being critical, which is how we are with ourselves? So the commandment there is to learn to love yourself as in those in that frame of thinking as God loves you. To love yourself as God loves you. And then you can truly love others. Then you can connect to all of the creation around you. But you have to, in our society, in our Western pull yourself up by your bootstraps, the Marlboro Man is the icon of
Mhm.
masculinity world.
Yeah.
We think that the idea of self-love is selfish, that it's we shouldn't be that way, somehow. It's just silly. um, Jack Cornfield, one of the great meditation teachers, um, tells a story of when the Dalai Lama came uh, to talk to a bunch of great meditation teachers. And one of them raised the hand and asked, what do you do about self loathing? And his translator had no word for it.
Mm.
And they had to speak for half an hour before the Dalai Lama could understand the concept of not loving, of not of being self-critical. And when he finally got it, Jack says, when he finally got it, he says, "Oh, I see, well, we have many different problems here. So, uh, and I think we can know from that that it doesn't have to be like that. There are cultures where that's not part of existence. There are whole cultures. It doesn't have to be that way, um, and that is, the poisonous root that the sweet fruit of happiness is an antidote to.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of self-loathing thoughts are connected to traumas from our past. And um, perhaps if we were more aware of our thoughts and
Mm-hmm.
were meditative in our culture, that wouldn't be so pervasive in our society.
Mm-hmm. Trauma-informed meditation is a whole another conversation,
Right.
um, because it comes up, and I am not trained in it. I have very close friends who are, and I respect them to the end of the earth. But it is, it comes up, and it can re-traumatize, and when it's uncovered and thought about and focused on. But there are ways, the folks who know how to do it. There are ways that it can come and out,
Mm-hmm.
up and out, and be transformational. Um, and we all have our little traumas. I was bullied. I mean, that was a little trauma, but not like some.
Yeah. But at least it sounds promising that you were teaching meditation in a university. That's exciting.
It
It's
is. It is. Hmm.
really exciting. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I've really enjoyed talking
Oh,
to you. And I have one last question, actually. I don't want to
of course.
let you go yet. But if your inner voice had a billboard, what would it say to the world?
My inner voice had a billboard. It would say that for the most part, we are living very small lives, and we are so much more if we just tap into it.
Hmm. Yeah, excellent.
You are so easy to speak with. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
for your questions. I feel heard. I feel stood up for, and I feel like I know what is happening and why it is happening.
Well, yay. See, a mirror. It's a mirror back to you. So.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you're listening and you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and rating this podcast, as it really helps get this podcast out to other people who might be interested in hearing it but don't know about it yet. And also, if you'd like to contact me or reach me, you can reach me at unconditioningpodcast@gmail.com or unconditioningpodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much, and until next time, stay tuned in to you.